Hello, and welcome to the Responsive Family Sleep Podcast. I'm your host, Kim Hawley, holistic sleep coach, lactation consultant, peaceful parenting educator, and mom. If you've ever felt overwhelmed by all the conflicting sleep info, frustrated with sleep information that just plain felt wrong, or searched desperately for a truly gentle and responsive sleep approach, then you are in the right place. In each episode, we'll be answering your most pressing baby and toddler sleep questions, busting those sleep myths, and helping you understand truly developmental, biologically normal baby and toddler sleep, plus encouraging you to trust your intuition along the way. Let's get started. Hello, and welcome back to the podcast. This week, we're doing something a little different, and I think it's going to be a lot of fun. We're going to talk about what you do as a parent, showing up in a world that tells you lots of shoulds and shouldn'ts, and doing that from the therapy perspective and the sleep coach perspective. So I know the setup is something you all deal with on a regular basis, and I touch on in different ways in this podcast, but I'm super excited to kind of banter it around with a really lovely guest. So I have Claire Felps with me on today, and Claire, thank you so much for joining me. I'm really excited about this conversation.
Me too, Kim. Thanks so much for having me. I appreciate it, and I'm looking forward to our conversation and helping some folks figure some things out.
Yeah, so why don't we start off by share a little bit about your work and what led you here? And since you're going to be talking from the ACT perspective, maybe give a like the I don't know, 30-second, 1 minute, whatever feels appropriate
Oh,
overview, because I know that I'm familiar with it from my own work, but a lot of people are not going to know and understand that perspective.
fair enough. Well, I'm Claire Felps. I'm a licensed clinical mental health counselor in both Virginia and Maryland. I came to this work through many means, but I ended up getting a master's degree and sort of wanting to work in the perinatal space because of my own experience becoming a parent, and just generally loving the idea of helping women through transitions, helping parents in general. And it felt really important to me, especially with my own personal journey going through having kids and the shift in mindset and being sort of inundated with a lot of information that didn't feel like it really connected with who I am and who I wanted to show up as a parent. And that's a nice segue, I think, into ACT specifically, which, for those of you out there who don't know, stands for Acceptance and Commitment Therapy, which is fancy language for the idea that we are trying to help folks figure out what means something to them and how to move towards those values flexibly and consistently. So within the ACT framework, we talk a lot about something called psychological flexibility. And that overlays really well with physical flexibility. Most of us, I don't know about you, can't just drop into the splits. We need work to get there. So the therapeutic work is figuring out how to strengthen and how to become more flexible so that when difficult situations, difficult feelings show up, we have a great toolkit and also the ability to tolerate difficult stuff.
Which
That's
is
what ACT is all about.
so applicable to parenting, isn't it? Like, oh my
Yes, this is
goodness, talk
great
about
to,
hard stuff and showing
yeah,
up and being flexible.
yeah.
Yeah, no, I love that. And that's such a concise explanation. So, what we thought we'd do is sort of talk through a few different really common scenarios and like what is the ACT perspective? What kind of perspective do I share with my clients? Because I do a lot of mindset work as well as practical work with them. And so there's a lot of overlap, right? And a lot of I don't know that similarity is the right word, but there's a lot of connections there. And so we thought it'd be fun to kind of chat through and share from those two different perspectives.
Mm, mm,
So let's start big picture, maybe, with you're a new parent
mm,
and you hear a lot of information about how you should be handling sleep and
mm.
what you should be doing and what you shouldn't be doing. And it's starting to make you really anxious. And you honestly never really thought about sleep too much before you became a parent because who does, right? And you're starting to feel a lot of anxiety. And I mean, Claire, it sounds like just some of the stuff you were saying, like the things don't resonate with you, right? Like I know
Yeah.
that's how I felt as a new parent. I was like, what is all this crazy sleep stuff out there?
Yeah.
And I see a lot of parents in that space where they are not sure they know what's normal, but they know that things aren't resonating and that they don't like or aren't comfortable with what they're hearing, but they also hear really loud voices telling them what
Hmm.
it should be and what they should be doing and what they shouldn't be doing. And it feels sometimes like very important, very dire if they don't follow that, very important to follow those rules. Claire, I bet you hear a lot of
Yeah.
that sort of being taught in that tension a lot too, right?
A lot. Yeah. I think anytime a should shows up, it's a really good indication that maybe we found a rule instead of a value. So within ACT, we'll make a really useful distinction between a value and a rule. And in this case, what we mean by a value is something that you have actually chosen. It's alive and it points somewhere specific. I want to be present and responsive with my child. That's a value. It's one that I'm sure that you hear a lot with your folks, and I
Yep.
definitely hear with mine as well.
That's why they come to
Uh,
me.
yeah. And a lot of what they've heard is rules. You should do this. You shouldn't do this. It's wrong to, you will mess up their development. You will create
Mhm.
habits you can't break.
Yep.
So a rule is something that got handed to you. And that could be explicit, someone said it to you, or it could be something that you just sort of learned through looking like, my baby should be sleeping. Why aren't they sleeping independently? And
Mhm.
so babies should sleep through the night by 4 months. You'll spoil them. You need to help them learn how to self-soothe. Rules are rigid and they usually come with sort of a hidden feeling of or else. So that's a really good hint for parents.
Yes.
Coming from someone very well intended, that's the pediatrician, that's your mother in law, that's the internet. That is a rule. You should do this or else. A value would be something that you are choosing. So it might be a reason that someone would come see you. I have this value, I have something that's really important to me, and I
Mhm.
don't know what to do with that. So it's often really tricky because this part can feel identical from the inside, especially when you're in 2 a.m. wake ups and you're overwhelmed and you're exhausted. But the really important distinction that I like to make for folks is that under pressure, rules and values function really differently. And that's
Mhm.
where we really want to see over time that folks are taking in values and making sense of their values versus creating more rules. So
Love that.
when you're acting from a value, criticism or feedback that you're hearing from the internet, from your mother-in-law, from anyone really, it stings, but it doesn't knock you over completely because you're coming from a grounded place with it. You really can feel that inside, right? That connection to who you want to be and how you want to show up. When you're acting from a rule, even a rule that looks like responsiveness, anytime you wobble, it feels like failure. Does that make sense for folks? Does that sound like something
Yeah.
that makes sense
Yeah,
to
and
you?
I'm so glad you said that we can have rules around responsiveness because I see that too, right?
Mhm.
Like I think it's more common to see rules around like sleep training culture and you'll spoil your baby, don't nurse them to sleep, they should be sleeping through the night, they shouldn't need night feeds, like that kind of stuff
Mhm.
is the
Mhm.
more mainstream. But within the like gentle, responsive attachment parenting world,
Mhm.
goodness, there are rules that can be really rigid and it can be just as judgmental in some corners, not most, but in some corners of the internet and the world and opinions as sort of the mainstream sleep training rules.
And I think that it gets even trickier because those feel like values then, right? They feel like,
Hmm.
oh, but these are attachment values.
Hmm.
And I think they're attachment rules. You should always respond to your kid. You should never let them cry. And I think what we're talking about here is how do you show up as a responsive parent who's also a human being?
Yeah, I love that. I think that's such an important way to look at it from both sides that we can both rule you versus, you know what I mean, versus what is the value and how that can express differently
Yeah.
from family to family.
Yeah.
Um,
And I'll
I
think
love
of
that.
it sometimes in these specific scenarios where, you know, maybe at 2 a.m., this is not the greatest moment to evaluate this, but when you're sitting with sort of a quiet moment, maybe hopefully nap time has eventually happened and you have a moment to take a break and to really think through. I think that values often sound like, is what I'm doing right coming from something I've actually chosen? Or is it coming from a fear that I've done it wrong?
Yes. And
That
sleep,
rule is going to
so
be, I feel like I
fear-based.
did it wrong, right? I'm worried about the judgment. I'm worried that I'm going to mess it up. And that can be from any perspective. But
Mm-hmm.
values are something that I chose. And it's not, does it always work perfectly? Does it always get me what I want? It doesn't, right? You know, we would all love kids who just go to sleep when we want, sleep for long periods of time. And from both of our perspectives, we know that that's not developmentally
Mm-hmm.
appropriate. And often
Mm-hmm.
it's not possible.
Yeah. Yeah. And I feel like sleep, maybe many things about early parenting in particular, but sleep is one where there is so much fear-based messaging out there.
Mhm.
It's not just you hear baby should be sleeping through the night and then you are creating the fear response to that. It's
Mhm.
that there are explicitly professionals saying that if your baby is not sleeping like this, you are having a negative impact on them, which is
Mhm.
BS. Like it's just
Mhm.
not true.
Right.
But there are messages out there explicitly that parents are hearing. They're not just like intuiting it. They are literally hearing it. Sometimes it's their
Oh,
pediatrician. Sometimes it's a sleep influencer.
oh, yeah.
Sometimes it's whoever.
Mhm.
But they are explicitly getting told that they
Oh,
are going to hurt their baby if their baby
yeah.
doesn't follow the rule or they don't follow the rule. And I think that makes it even harder, than
Does,
in
right?
other
And it really
areas.
brings up that fear center of the brain, right? I don't want to get too technical, but the part of your brain that makes decisions is not nearly as old or well developed as the part of you that feels scared or worried.
Mm-hmm.
And so anytime a rule activates fear, it's really hard and takes a lot of work to sit with. I'm scared and I'm still being the person that I want. I hear the judgment, I hear it's there. And that's the longer term work. You know, I'm sure with your folks, definitely with mine, of I can hear this, I can notice the response, the anxiety, the fear, the worry, the concern, and still choose and act from a place of value.
Mm-hmm. And a lot of times with my clients,
Mhm.
because most of the parents that I'm working with, right, they have maybe not as clear of their values as they would after working with someone like you, right? But they have a value pull towards me.
Mhm.
Like, gosh, 90+%. Like every once in a while I'll get someone who like, I did sleep training, it didn't work. It was terrible. I'm looking for something totally different. That's maybe a little less value, maybe a little bit more like we tried the thing and it very, very spectacularly failed on us. But most of my clients are like coming to me because of the value of responsiveness. And so we're not defining that value, right? But we are often helping them manage and support that value, right? With all sorts of practical sleep strategies, but also things like you don't owe everybody or every source your attention. So
Such a
um,
good one. Yeah.
we can be really intentional about who we follow on Instagram or social media or whatever, who we
Mhm.
listen to, who we ask questions to, who we share information with, who we are willing to have a deeper conversation with. And if they are making you doubt yourself, making you feel bad, making you anxiety, ridden or
Mhm.
whatever, we can set some boundaries there.
Mhm.
And I find that that's really helpful along with helping parents feel more informed. Like this is what the evidence actually says about normal sleep, not what our culture would like you to believe. This is what the research and evidence actually says about developing good emotion regulation and being responsive in the early years, not that fear-based oversimplification that you're hearing. And so a combination of talking through like, hey, this is what the research actually says. This is like, yeah, we can manipulate a study here and there and people do it all the time, but like the overwhelming body of evidence is supporting this, respond, that is healthy. But also, again, we can set boundaries and we can be mindful about who and where we get our information from or share our information. right? Like
Yeah.
you don't need to tell your bestie who had a really great experience with Cried Out that you are bed sharing and not sleep training like that. That maybe you have a great communication relationship and you can be like, you do you, I do me, and there's no tension. But if that's not the case, you don't need to have those conversations, with her, and you can still have a good friendship, right? You can just not. That's not your support system for that specific issue.
That makes sense. Yeah, I think being really mindful and careful about the information that you bring in, because as you started the podcast, we sort of were beginning to talk about new parents, and I think that a lot of the work that I do, and I'm sure sometimes this is true for you too, is actually preemptive. It's when folks get pregnant or think about getting pregnant, I'll often start telling them, they'll start asking, what's the best baby carrier, what's the best this, what's the best this, and I said, at the end of the day, these are parenting decisions. And so what's really important is to learn how to ground yourself and root yourself in what makes sense for you, what feels right internally, and then looking for sources to support that externally to you. Because the internet and, society at large will have so many things to suggest, right?
Yeah.
Try this, just do this. And what we're trying to steer people away from is that overwhelm that can lead to almost a shutdown where they look for more rules because they want like the right thing to do.
Just tell me the right thing so we bring
Yeah.
some order to this chaos.
Yeah. And that can be, like you said, on the gentle parenting side too, right? Like respond to every single cry, never put them down. They should never be upset. They should never, nothing bad should ever happen. And I think that at the end of the day, what we're talking about from both sides is like, this is going to be hard. It is a hard adjustment. Not getting sleep is not a fun thing. And we got to really be intentional about the information that we bring in those situations, because you're already so vulnerable that following someone who tells you, oh, these are the 5 hot tips to get my kid to sleep through the night, and this is just what I did, and you just need a white noise machine. I would be really careful about doing that with folks. I'll often tell my clients, humans, and definitely correct me if I'm wrong here, Kimberly, but humans are the only mammals that expect their kids to sleep separate from the parents in another room in a cold crib by themselves with a monitor. That is not an expectation that other mammals have. And even a couple hundred years ago, it's not an expectation that we had. So these are things that are newer, and because our society is difficult, it's hard not to get sleep and still go to work and still function and still be the human being you want to be.
Yeah, a lot of the sleep training stuff came with pushes for productivity and efficiency in the
Yeah.
Industrial Revolution. So there is definitely like a capitalism,
Mm-hmm.
pull yourself up from your bootstraps, productivity, go work in the factory. Like, we don't have time for this kind of mindset that helped build and shape those expectations, because a lot of them come back from the late 1800s and early 1900s. Well before we had like scientific knowledge about child development. We had intergenerational knowledge, but the ones bringing these new ideas in were uh, men, early pediatricians, and I mean at that time men didn't really parent at all, so like they weren't coming from a place of experience. Sorry, guys out there, it's not, it's a different world. We have many active and engaged dads, but that was not the case really at that
Yeah.
time. So yeah.
Yeah, those also sound like societal rules, right? You
Mm-hmm.
should be doing this. It benefits society if you
Yep.
should just do X, Y, and Z. And I think it's, again, those moments of, am I freely choosing this? Am I making a decision that feels internally guided, really sort of a compass towards responsiveness, towards what matters to me, towards connection? And those are not easy to answer questions, right? They're not 5 tips to get more connected. But in those moments when something is hard, it's pulling from, just because it's hard doesn't mean it's wrong. This is something,
Yeah.
I want to do, and it's still really hard.
Yeah. Yeah. And like for me, there's that mindset piece, right? Normal doesn't mean easy. Normal doesn't mean we can't improve things either, though.
Sure.
And so there's like the help you ground in what is normal, because sometimes it's not. And we need to figure out why it's not, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then there is the confidence building, the mindset, right? The resiliency piece that is a lot of that more mindset work.
Mm-hmm.
But then there are practical strategies. Like I say this all the time.
Mm-hmm.
Modern life is bad for sleep. across the board. So we can't just wing it. Or if you have an easy kiddo, you might be able to wing it. But like if we want to maximize sleep, we have to be intentional because modern life is bad for sleep for everybody.
Yeah.
And so sometimes there are like things that we need to be really intentional about. And so
Yeah.
there's
That's
that more
something.
practical piece
Mm-hmm.
as
Oh,
well, like a bit more
100%.
solutions focused, a bit more
Yeah.
like what are the things that you need to do,
Yeah. I
and how
think that
might that
makes
apply in
sense.
your home.
Yeah, that makes so much sense to me. And I think that that's a really important thing, for both of us to discuss of sort of what happens if you're presented with a scenario, both from a therapeutic and sleep coach side. And the one thing that I'll point out there, and this is a therapist nitpicky thing, is that even when we say, like, if you have a good kid or an easy kid or a
Oh
good
yeah, yeah, yeah.
sleeper, we find that language so embedded in our culture, right? Do you have a
Hmm.
good baby? Is she a good sleeper? And what you mean is, are they sleeping long stretches uninterrupted? Are they, I think mostly it's coming from a place of concern for the parent. Like, are you doing okay? But the language I like to be really specific about, like when you hear that, are you a good baby?
Yeah.
Then there are some accounts that I'll find they're even just sort of amusing of like, I've only had to break them out of juvie twice, just sort of like almost a humorous response. Like, yeah, they're a good
Yeah.
baby.
I find it's more like, are they an easygoing temperament, are
Yeah.
going to have easier going sleep generally. Obviously,
Mhm.
there's no universals.
Yeah.
But like easier going temperament kiddos with no health concerns are, particularly if they are higher sleep needs, are going to be the families I almost never see
Yeah.
because they don't actually need a lot of support, even to be responsive. Like those are the kiddos that, like, almost no matter what you do, they're going to sleep
Yeah.
well. They're going to sleep restfully. They're not going to need as high a support
Mm-hmm.
versus the highly sensitive, highly persistent, highly active, highly alert, right? More intense babies
Sure. Lower
I
sleep
see a
needs.
lot
Yeah.
of because you have to work a lot harder to survive, frankly. And then I see a decent amount of the middle of the road because our culture doesn't support middle of the road as actually being middle of the road. We define them as bad sleepers, right?
Right.
Bad. Um, and so, I'll see those folks as
Yeah, that
well.
makes sense. Yeah.
Um, since we've sort of talked about the general, right? I feel like this is the landscape, right, that a parent is
Mhm.
existing in. Let's maybe shift and talk about a couple specifics scenarios. I know before we started recording, you were talking to me about like, 2:30 in the morning and what do you do? Um,
Mhm.
do you want to kind of outline one and then I'll outline one and we'll
Yeah,
kind of
sure.
go from there?
Yeah, so I think that there's this idea of, you know, you have co-regulation, you have the sort of exhausted parent in the middle of the night. It's 2:30 in the morning. You just want them to sleep. You feel overwhelmed
Mm-hmm.
and you're exhausted. And so it's really hard to pull from values. It's hard to figure out how to be responsive when you're also really drained.
Yeah.
And so that's the trap so many parents are in at 2:30 in the morning. They're exhausted, they feel
Yeah.
resentful, they feel guilty about their resentment, and now they're managing three things at once instead of one. So
Mm-hmm.
another thing that ACT really focuses on is self-compassion. And
Mm-hmm.
what it means is I'm exhausted, I'm frustrated, this is really hard. And sitting with that, like this is just exhausting. This is just really hard.
Mm-hmm.
And
It's
that's
hard
it.
because it's hard.
Yeah, it's hard because it's hard. And that's something that, there's actually neuroscience in this, right? Like naming an emotion creates a tiny pause in that feeling. And as we name it, we say, God, I'm exhausted. I feel overwhelmed. I feel resentful. Act language is I'm noticing that I feel this. And it creates just even a little bit more distance. I'm noticing a thought. I'm noticing a feeling
Mm-hmm.
rather than I'm this way. It creates a little bit of space, and that space is where the work can take place, a little bit more flexibility, a little bit more
Mm-hmm.
noticing and awareness of God, hard. Oof, God, this is hard.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So true. A lot of times, if we know this is something a parent is regularly struggling with, for me, we will
Mhm.
like talk through the scenario ahead of time.
Yeah.
Like, we're regularly struggling with this. I just don't know what to do. Like, do I
Mhm.
give them space? Do I pick them up? Do I bring them into bed with me? Do I try to resettle them in the crib? How many times? Right. And we will talk through and sort of game plan.
Mhm. Mhm.
Because I find that a lot of times they're also like afraid of starting something that creates a bad habit or sets a
Um,
precedent or an expectation that they don't want to
mhm.
follow through on long term. And so again, bringing with the fear, right? That I'm going to do something wrong that's going to
Mhm.
make my life harder.
Yeah,
And
it's
so we'll
such an
talk
important.
through, right?
Mhm.
Like, what is the overarching need here,
Yeah,
right? It is
yeah.
usually regulation and safety.
Mhm.
And then, like, what if you just bring them to bed? Would that, like, how does that work for your family if you just
Yeah,
co-sleep, right, for the rest of the night?
yeah.
Or what if you try to you try to transfer them into the crib 2 times,
Mhm.
and then we are saying after 2 times, that's it.
Mhm.
Just, you know, bed share for the rest of the night, or lay
Mhm.
down on the floor bed, or that you have set up in their room, or,
Yeah,
whatever it is that we've game planned with them. Not saying that
right,
everybody's answer is bed sharing, but I often find that like all the families transferring so many times, and each time baby's waking up. And
right.
it's like that is so frustrating for
Of
everybody. And
course.
so like kind of helping, co-creating, like not me giving them, kind of going
Mhm.
back to rules, but in a different way. Not
Mhm.
me giving them rules, but helping them kind of create some gentle decision making ahead of time for them. So you're
Right.
not making those decisions at 2 in the morning.
Mhm.
We already have a game plan.
Right.
Try A, try B, and then
Mhm.
try C. Just
Yeah.
so like we're not flailing around. We've already kind of talked through it, thought through it, decided what feels most aligned and like the
Yeah.
best fit. And then, email me tomorrow, email me after, and we can always reflect
Mhm.
back too and say, hey, I didn't like how this went. This felt
Exactly.
messy. How could we maybe do it differently this time? Or maybe that was the best way it was going to play out. And I think more to what you're saying, how do we sit with the fact that like sometimes it's just messy,
Yeah.
It's not always
But
going to be
but it's
peaceful.
adaptive too, right? From
Mm-hmm.
both, from your end, it sounds like, and also definitely from mine. We're not asking people to pick something and do it for the rest of their life. That's
Uh-huh.
the
We're not
rule.
committing to this forever.
Nope,
It's just for
nope.
tonight.
We're saying, what happens if we try this? How does that
Mm-hmm.
go for you? We check in because I'm sure your approach too is also, it's very experiential. Like, what does it
Mm-hmm.
feel like? What happened when you brought them into your bed? What
Yeah.
happened
What's
when
the
you tried
context?
twice? Yeah, what's the context and how did it sit with you, right? You tried something, it didn't work. And from a therapeutic standpoint, right, there's often that fear of failure. There's that sense that I messed something up because it didn't work and I thought it was going to work. And that's disappointment, that's frustration. And those are feelings
Mm-hmm.
we can sit with. And we can choose differently next time, right? We tried settling them twice in the crib. That didn't work. I got so angry by the second time that I just couldn't, I felt so overwhelmed and then I couldn't sleep. I'm sure that your guidance in there would be, okay, well, let's try something different next time then. That's that flexibility piece. We're not asking folks to pick something and never do anything otherwise ever again. We're saying,
Mm-hmm.
let's try this, let's get some concrete strategies, and let's see how it goes. You try
Yeah.
saying this to the friend, right? You try to deflect, per your earlier point, you have a friend who doesn't agree with you. You try and move the conversation on. You try something else. We just keep trying different strategies, whether it's with a friend, whether it's with a baby who's not sleeping the way we wish, whether it's with a partner, a mother-in-law, whatever it is. And we see how it goes. We see how it feels for you. And then we get to reevaluate. That's the freedom you have, is to keep choosing. That's
Yeah.
where ACT is helpful.
Yeah. And I know like one of the things that my clients love when we're doing that is like the difference between that on your own and doing that, I guess, with in relationship with a professional, right? Like so for me, it's like I'm giving them that gentle structure of like, we can't bail on this because it didn't work and you tried it once.
Right.
Right? I mean, you can. I'm not saying you can't, but like that's not a really good
Data point.
judgment
Sure.
of how it's going to work for most things, not everything, but for most things. So, like, let's try this over the next few nights.
Right.
And unless something really catastrophic happens, right? Like, let's look back and look for a pattern. Because, I find that parents will try something once and they don't reflect on the context of it. And it's like, this didn't work. And we're jumping from thing to thing to thing. And it's like, this feels chaotic even for me to hear,
Yeah.
let alone how it probably feels to you guys, at two in
Yeah,
the
because
morning
there's
or
that
at bedtime.
expectation, right? You set up, you
Yeah.
try this once and it'll work. And that's the sleep industry at large, right? Like not your
Yeah.
approach and not my approach to therapy, but there's that sense folks come into therapy for that too, right? Like, well, I've tried this before and it doesn't work. It's like, what do you
Mhm.
mean it didn't work? You mean you still felt frustrated or that baby still didn't sleep the way you wanted? That's
Mm-hmm.
not it not working. That meant, there's something frustrating about it. You still had a feeling it still didn't go exactly how you wanted. And it's an important distinction that I'll make from the ACT framework, that values are not outcome oriented. So like we
Mm-hmm.
can't decide how things go. That's not under our control. We can't make a baby sleep. We can't make someone respond well.
Mm-hmm.
We can show up as ourselves, grounded in the things that are responsive and caring and attuned. And then how it goes from there is work on the mindset shift, like you talked about, to maybe work with a therapist on. I notice I get so frustrated, so overwhelmed. I feel stuck. And then I am problem solving and saying, this didn't work, this didn't work, this didn't work. And I'll help folks reevaluate, what do you mean it didn't work? What does work mean?
I
Oh, you
love that.
mean get the outcome you wanted one time. And I think
Mm-hmm.
it sounds like from your perspective too, that's not what we're looking at. We're looking at, can we consistently change patterns that work in the long run to get you
Mm-hmm.
feeling connected, responsive as a caregiver, and eventually get to a place where you're getting some more sleep.
Yeah. I think the
Mm-hmm.
tricky thing about where I approach these situations for like, is something working? Is
Mm-hmm.
it can sometimes be both,
Mm-hmm.
because sometimes the we actually are doing a specific practical strategy for an outcome, right? So, um, how do we
Mm-hmm.
make it so that you could, so let's do a scenario here, right?
Yeah, yeah.
It's bedtime,
Mm-hmm.
and your bedtimes have been really draggy and really long and really disruptive, and baby doesn't calm down,
Mm-hmm.
and once they fall asleep, as soon as you put them down, they wake back up, and it becomes like a 2-3 hour event.
Been
And
there.
I would
Yep.
argue that most parents would find that unsustainable.
Mm-hmm.
um you know and so, they come to me,
Mm-hmm.
and they might come saying they want independent sleep. And on our intro call, I will dig into that, because often that's not a realistic expectation for a lot of babies. And I
Mm-hmm.
might say, okay, what about bedtime? Like, what's feeling harder? Is it the amount of time? Is it the amount of effort? Is it that, you're spending an hour bouncing your kiddo on a yoga ball and your back is hurting?
Right.
Right? Like, where are we coming at? Because that informs what strategies we're doing.
Mm-hmm.
And it somewhat informs whether I'm a good fit for you. Because if you're like, the only outcome I'll accept is the baby that'll go down in their crib awake, then I'm not your sleep coach. So there's like, how do we piece this out? What is happening and what's the real problem here? Often it's about energy output, and it's about time, and then wanting a little time for yourself. And those are all different problems to solve, right? So um, we
Mm-hmm.
might have a strategy of, if you transfer your baby like this, is it effective?
Mm-hmm.
And so that strategy can work or not work,
Mm-hmm.
right? And sometimes it can not work, and we can tweak it
Right.
and get into a little bit more nuance. But sometimes every transfer strategy, every transfer, like troubleshooting, doesn't work.
Mm-hmm.
So we have to say, this didn't work,
Mm-hmm.
but maybe it works at bedtime, but not at 10 at night. Right. So then we get into more context. Or maybe the
Right.
problem isn't that your baby won't sleep without you, it's that they are really sensitive to the transfer motion of up and over the crib. And so a
Mm.
floor bed or a travel crib with a zip side,
Yeah.
you can nurse your baby down or rock, have them against your chest, lay down, and you can roll away, and we can get that separate sleep. So it's
Yeah.
like there's the mindset piece of like, what are we actually digging into? Did we give it enough chance? What is the context?
Yeah.
And then there's also this piece of like, nah, this strategy just really didn't work.
Yeah.
But what's another way that we can look at what you actually wanted underneath that,
Yeah.
and try to see if we can approach it from a different angle? So it's always really interesting, because everyone, you can hear the same frustration, and I'm sure you see this a lot in your work too. The same frustration about bedtime. It's taking a long time. I just want baby to fall asleep independently.
Mhm.
And three different parents can actually have different needs underneath that
Of
same
course. Yeah.
frustration vent, right? They're coming from really different angles. And so their solutions and where we end up, is often really different.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Setting aside that their babies are also different humans, but like their
Right.
needs are actually coming from different locations or different
Yeah. Yeah,
spaces.
of course. And that's what I think, it sounds like definitely your approach. And I would say my approach as well with an ACT is so flexible, right? I'm not looking for, here's the symptom, here's the solution, here's what we do. Okay. And now do it. We're talking about like that feedback piece of like, okay, so I tried rolling away, that didn't work, right? I tried delatching, that didn't work. I tried this, that
Mm-hmm.
didn't work. And of course, we want to find things that work well for folks, right? Like we don't want to sort of leave them with like, you're going to be frustrated, tough cookies, don't know what to tell you, because that's a frustration tolerance that, exhausted, overwhelmed, overworked parents are not
Mm-hmm.
going to tolerate, right? And
Yeah.
rightfully so. That makes sense. I think that I always like to think of things as like, it didn't work to get rid of your frustration. Got it. We don't get rid of feelings. You're still going to have a
Yes.
feeling, and that feeling might really inform, per your point, like what we do differently. Like, okay, that's too much time, right? And, at the risk of being a bit personal, what ended up happening for me a lot of the time with my kids was that it would disrupt my feeling of connection with them because
Mm-hmm.
I would say, when I spend 2 or 3 hours putting you to bed, I build resentment. And that gets in the way of my connection with you.
Yep.
We got to try something different. And I need to become a bit more flexible sometimes. But per your point, I need different strategies because
Mm-hmm.
I'm attachment focused, I'm connection based. I want to be responsive to myself and to my kids. And if that 2 to 3 hour routine is disrupting that, that's not functional for anybody.
Yep. And I love what you said there, like we need to do something different and I need to be more flexible because so often in parenting things, we need a different strategy for the child, the baby, the toddler, and we need to work on some things from our
Oh, yeah.
own, that we're bringing
Yeah, and
into
actually
that
call it
space.
yes and, like yes and, or what
Mm-hmm.
else, and what else, and what else. And we'll keep pulling from those strategies of like, yes, that didn't work. And maybe we need to try it 3 or 4 more times, right?
Mm-hmm.
You have one data point from what you're discussing, right? We tried this transfer one time.
Mm-hmm. What else
That's
was
not
happening that day, right?
right,
Like maybe
right,
you had a late nap and baby wasn't tired.
right, right.
And I will sometimes be like, okay, so we have kind of like the things that set baby up for success, but
Mhm.
also the things that set you up for success. Like you didn't eat dinner and you're hungry and you have your brain on your to-do list, so you're not very present, right? We're just kind of going
Yeah,
through the responsive motions.
right.
Okay, that's a whole set of things that need their own strategies to support you.
Mhm.
And then there's like the practical strategies of like, did baby nap too late? Is bedtime appropriately timed? Do
Right.
we help have a good bedtime routine? What's our
Yeah.
strategy to transfer? Where they sleep? All that kind of more baby specific pieces. And
Yeah.
we're looking at it from both sides.
Yeah. And I think that there's so much education. It sounds like you offer folks too, from intro calls and throughout your work with them. That's so different than what we hear, right? We, pull up an app that tells you it's 6 weeks, your baby should do this. And it sounds
Mm-hmm.
like your approach is so much more in line with how I work of maybe what's your baby like? Have they always had sort of low sleep needs? What are the wake windows looking like? What
Mm-hmm.
do their cues look like? Because sometimes my kids just rub their eyes. They're not always tired. And I
Mm-hmm.
remember with my first, I'm sure you hear this all the time, I was so rigid myself in the wake windows that I was like, okay, it has been an hour. You need to sleep. You are 4 weeks old. It is said it's been an hour. You need to sleep. And I would spend 45 minutes bouncing him on a ball
Because they weren't tired. Yep.
because he wasn't tired or he was settled enough or he liked the bouncing. And it was because in my mind, it was time for sleep, right? I got rigid. I
Uh-huh.
had a rule and I
Yes.
tried to enact that. And it didn't work. It didn't work for me and definitely didn't work for him.
I would argue that's a large part of people's nap struggles. Not, of course, all of them, but like it's that looking externally for the rules about when they should be
Mhm.
sleeping without any regard
Yeah.
to their actual sleep needs and how quickly
Mhm.
they build sleep pressure,
Yep.
and what environment they need to relax into sleep. And when we
Yeah.
start looking at those, it's so much more nuanced, right? So, like stepping away from the societal rules or the app rules, which tend to
Mhm.
skew lower on the wake windows and higher on the total sleep. And we stop looking at our baby as an individual
Yep.
and stop being curious about why else could they be behaving like this.
Hmm.
And frankly, some babies don't cue, right? Like some people have weak interoception and they don't always know that they are tired until they're really tired. They don't always know they're hungry until they're really hungry. And
Yeah.
so some babies are beautiful cuers and it's so lovely once you figure it out to read them, and others just don't. I mean, they just don't. And or it's so subtle that it's so easy to miss
Mhm.
that sometimes, yeah, sometimes we do have to look at the clock for those babies, but we need to do it in an intentional way, not in a the app told
Right.
me. way.
No, and that's the responsiveness you're talking about, right? We have
Yep.
some strategies, we apply these different things, we look at sort of what this kid is doing. And then from the parent perspective, we often sit with like, God, I was hoping to have that break and I'm not going to get it.
Uh-huh.
I was expecting this relief. And as we're speaking right now, Kim, right, my youngest is asleep. And my fingers were crossed that this would all work out,
That she stays
right?
asleep.
Yeah, she stays asleep, that the transfer works, right? That she decides that today is one of her longer naps. And that's a huge point of flexibility that I've done not only through, I think, like you mentioned, good resourcing, right? Finding resources that really support responsive, adaptive, developmentally appropriate sleep,
Mm-hmm.
and also my own work of, okay, so some days she sleeps differently than others.
Yeah.
And if I just track a wake window, and it's true of breastfeeding too, I know you see folks in this too, of like, but they already fed on that side for 20 minutes. They should have 2 hours. And it's like,
Mm-hmm.
sometimes they just want more now.
Yeah.
They want less. And I think that the more that we can loosen those rigidities, and come up with strategies that work, that help you regulate, that help baby sleep, that sounds like it's, just such an important part of your work too, of the responsiveness and the resourcing of parents. And that's
Yeah.
just so important. It's such important work that you do, and so supportive of the type of work that I do too.
Yeah. I mean, it all, right? So it's like, it's a journey, and we don't always know these things are going to be a struggle when
Yeah.
we're pregnant. I want to just spend a little bit of time as we're wrapping up talking about one
Yeah.
more scenario, because I think
Yeah.
this is really common.
Hmm.
And that is your family, whether it's your mother in law, your own mother, your sister, your cousin, tends to be more like hard to deal with when it's like one of your parents or in laws, is constantly critical or sharing that unsolicited advice
Yep.
about sleep or parenting more broadly that isn't responsive, right? That doesn't match your values. And so you're kind of define your own values, you're trying to grapple with it.
Hmm.
And you're stuck in that situation where, you know, you're constantly like, why aren't you sleep training? Why haven't you done cried out? Why are you still
Yeah.
doing contact naps? You know, if you
Yep.
bed share, you're going to be bed sharing forever. Your kid never going to get that kid out of your bed. Like
Hmm.
I work with, and I'm sure you do as well, lots of parents who are stuck, right? They don't want to cut off their in-laws completely or anything like radical like that.
Yeah.
There's nothing wrong. They're not bad people,
Right,
but
right,
the constant unsolicited advice, especially that isn't even closely even anywhere near the
right.
path they're taking and the values that they are working on,
Yeah.
is exhausting. Like that is exhausting, right? That
Oh gosh.
bombardment is so
Yeah,
exhausting.
no, I was
So,
gonna say it's a bombardment, right? You're sort of being inundated with all of this really well-intentioned advice. And so
mhm,
from my perspective, what I think of is how at the end of the day can we distill what you're hearing, right? Because there's content of like, you should do this and they'll do this forever. And that's the content. For ACT, we really care about the context. Like, what is that person
mhm,
trying to do? They're trying to offer me something. They see me suffering. They're trying to connect. They're trying to offer wisdom. They're trying to be helpful.
I
I
love that.
hear that and I can hold that and hold that relationship as like, God, that person wants to help me. And that's a really important piece, it's not in line with my values. And that's the grounding piece of I hear that and it doesn't line up with how I feel. And so work, with you getting more of that reinforcement, work with the therapist getting more of that reinforcement
Mhm,
to set, there are a number of strategies, right? Humor, like I mentioned earlier, can be one of them of like,
mhm.
oh gosh, yeah, I am worried about nursing my college student. Do you think he'll stop by then? You can try something humorous, right? If
Yeah.
that's a relationship you have. Even in your own mind, I'll often offer people like your mind is a safe place. If you want to be snarky in your head and that helps you detach a little bit from that of like, oh God, yep, mother-in-law is saying that thing that she says.
Mhm,
Mother-in-laws be mother-in-lawing.
mhm.
And you just nod and smile. And I'll work a lot with folks and like, listen, it doesn't matter what choices you make, people have judgment about them, right? You have no
So
kids,
true.
people have judgment. One kid, oh, an only child, two kids. You better hope you got two different genders, because otherwise are you going for the third? If you have three, you're going for the fourth. If you have more than three, people start asking you, like, ooh, was the fourth on purpose? It doesn't matter what you do. It doesn't matter if you co-sleep. It doesn't matter if you sleep train. People will find reasons to judge you.
Yes.
So we figure out ways to say, like, I hear the judgment, and maybe that's an internal monologue of I hear your judgment. I'm going to choose to say, thank you. Thank you for sharing that. Yeah. Okay. And we really just work on grounding and rooting them in. That's not my value. That person's trying to offer me something useful. It's not super useful to me. Maybe if you have a great relationship per our, earlier conversation with your friend, maybe you could say, hey, mom, I love you. Times have changed. We don't do that anymore. There are lots of responses, but I think ultimately we're trying to help folks find ways to say, this is true and this is true. I hear the good intention and it doesn't work for me.
Yeah. I love that. It it aligns with a lot of times, right ahead of holidays, travels, family
Oh gosh.
trips, holiday
Yep.
season. I have this conversation a lot with my clients
Oh
and
yeah, that's when therapy rates spike too. Everyone comes in when they're like, oh my gosh, my family.
uh-huh. And they
Yeah.
just want to think through it ahead of time with me, like, and so we'll go like, is this the person you gently inform? Right?
Mhm.
Like, I love my mother-in-law. She's amazing. And she raised her kiddos really differently than we are raising our kids. But like, right, obviously my husband's amazing. So like she did a good job. And
Again, there's no rules, right? It's not, oh, she's a terrible mom. She's
but
a
like,
great.
yeah, she was the one to educate. Like I didn't even have to do it. I would post things on Facebook. My oldest is 13. So like I'd post
Mhm.
parenting articles on Facebook and she would read them. She'd be like, oh, Kim, I really like the article you posted the other day. It makes a lot of sense. I never thought of it that way. And like,
Mhm.
I'm just so lucky because like, that's like perfect, right? You can't ask for better than that.
Yeah, she's
And like,
flexible herself, right? Like
yeah, it
she's done
wasn't,
work to be flexible and receptive.
and she wasn't taking it as an attack, just like times change, you're doing what works.
Yeah,
And my mom already had that orientation, so like it wasn't like
yeah.
there wasn't any conflict there. But like we'll do that. We're like, is this somebody who can gently educate? Is it someone that we do humor with? Is it someone that
Mhm.
we just set a boundary, kind of like thank you for sharing what worked for you, and then like not engage? Is it someone that we say, okay, I appreciate you've told me everything you've told me, and you know, can we set that aside and enjoy the
Yeah,
rest of the trip, right? So I love that you are kind of coming at it to the same places, like what's going to work for that relationship. Is it humor?
yeah,
Is it education? Is it a gentle boundary? Is it seeing their good intent? Because we
right.
can't control them, right? But
No, it would be so nice though. I'm sure folks come in, right? They want to control the baby's sleep. They want to control their friend's response, their partner, whatever it is. That's such a human understanding thing that people do. And I think so much of it, what we're talking about is let's just do a little bit of testing. Like,
yeah,
if I try and deflect, does that work? Does that person really double down? There are lots of strategies per your earlier points, right? Like there are lots of strategies that work well in those scenarios. And we just sort of have to feel it out a bit. But what we want to do, to circle back to the beginning of the conversation, is when we're grounded in values, those are things we've chosen.
yeah,
That's not something someone else has chosen, and they don't have to. That
mm-hmm.
person really loves sleep training. Alrighty, that worked well for you. I'm happy
Yep,
for you. And what else? And that didn't work for me, or it doesn't align with my values and the way that I want to parent my kid.
yeah,
I don't need to convince you otherwise. Might do some gentle education when folks are receptive. That's always
mm-hmm.
great. Um, and at the end of the day, you do what works well for you. And I
Yeah,
think that that's what we're trying to reinforce with folks is what works
yeah,
well for you, what feels responsive and connecting.
yes. what what feels right for
Mhm.
you,
Yeah.
right? And we don't have to project that outward. Um,
No,
that
it'd be
it's right for
nice,
someone else.
right? I think we often think, especially that you and I are very similar. We're like, have you tried bed sharing? Have you tried this? Have you tried, right? We get excited about our versions too. And at the end of the day, I honestly hold no judgment for people's decisions. As
Yep.
long as you're doing it safely either way, those are your calls. It's your kid, your relationship, and it's your
Mhm,
well-being. You need to do
mhm,
what works well for you. And my hope is, connecting folks with people like you, Kim, that they get more education so that they don't feel trapped by traditional sleep training. They feel like they
mhm.
have choices. And that's my work too, of like, I don't want you to feel like you only have one choice to deal with depression and to deal with anxiety, to deal with parenting. I want you to feel well resourced,
Yeah,
ways that really line up with who you want to be and how you want to show up.
Yep. Yeah. No, I love that. And just that parents are able to build those resources and make informed decisions and
Mhm.
have access to the information that helps them make informed decisions and have access to what they need to feel like they have options and resources and
Mhm.
um, the support to have the space to push back against those rules and those shoulds
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
kind of box them in, right? And make them feel like they
Totally.
don't have those
We talk and
options.
act a lot about the idea that like choices and values should open your purview. It should give you more choices, more options. Like I want to be attached, so I have this option, so I have this option, so I have this option. A lot of rules, that's another really key way to look at rules. They shut you down. You have to, you must, you should. It's really limiting. You can only do this if you want to do it right. I don't know. Parenting is already vulnerable enough. The last thing I want to do is give folks more ways to feel badly about making choices that work well for their family, whatever those choices are.
Yeah. Parenting is messy. And I really like that way of looking at values as opening up.
Mhm.
Um,
Yeah, because we want flexibility, right? Like, we
yeah.
don't get flexibility by saying, "I can only do it this way." We get flexibility by saying, "What are all the choices?" And maybe at the end of the day, for your strategies, you try the choices that really work well for you. You have data, this works well for your kiddo, works well for your values, of course. But there's also flexibility to say, "Gosh," and I'm sure this comes up, "My gosh, my kid hit 6 months, and now they're sleeping differently. What do I do
Yep.
now?"
It's not working anymore. And how do we
Yeah.
now change and re-figure that out again? Because you're going to do it so many
Mhm.
times in the early years
Oh,
and
yeah.
then maybe more spread out, but like throughout parenting, like what works for my 13-year-old is not what would have
Mhm.
works with my 8-year-old. Like, I'm obviously different people, but like the different ages, right? So like that reevaluation happens so much more frequently in the first few years, and then it starts to slow down a little.
Mhm.
But your kiddos and how you show up in parenting and what works for your family is going to change.
Yeah. And that it's so normal to feel completely unmoored when you first do it because it's
Yep.
just not what we see. What we see in media is kids who show up to run through flowery meadows or they show up for, a plot point. We don't see the kids, the messiness of like, what do I do when I'm not getting sleep? What do I do? How do I solve this? And like, hopefully we have some intergenerational knowledge that's helpful. But if not, then that's where you come in, Kim, right? Like that's what's so important is to resource people with, hey, you could try this. You can be responsive and attached and still feel connected to your kid and still work through those things.
Yeah. Ugh, I love that. I feel like I could keep talking with you about this
Yeah.
forever, but I feel like that's almost a good place to wrap things up
Yeah.
because isn't that the heart of it,
Mhm.
right? Like you have options. Let's choose based on your values and find that balance where, we're doing things that feel aligned and
Mhm.
meeting our needs in the way that it makes sense in the phase that we're in.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that.
So I will get this info from you and put it in the show notes, but
Mhm.
where can folks find you, especially if they are in the DC area?
Yeah. So I do telehealth right now in Maryland and Virginia. So I have a website. It's metamorphosiscounseling.org. That's one way. My email is claire@metamorphosiscounseling.org. It's pretty consistent. Again, my name is Claire Felps. I am a licensed professional counselor. I am also a postpartum support international certified counselor. So I work a lot in the perinatal space.
Love that.
And yeah, I always welcome collaborations and talking to folks. And I'm looking forward to talking more in the future, Kim, and continuing to collaborate.
Yeah.
And I hope this episode was helpful for the folks that you're working with.
Awesome. Thank you so much for such
Oh,
a great conversation.
so great. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for joining me today. I hope this episode left you feeling more informed, confident, and encouraged on your sleep journey. And just a reminder before you go that nothing in this episode is individualized to your specific sleep situation, nor is it to be taken as medical advice. Take what resonates, ignore what doesn't, and check with your healthcare provider about any medical concerns. Take a moment to subscribe to this podcast so that you'll never miss an episode. And take a moment to rate, review, or share an episode you love on social media. All of that helps parents just like you find me, this podcast, and this gentle and responsive sleep information. I'll see you next time.